19 seasons. And that's how long the Houston Astros had existed without reaching the postseason. 19 years of almost, not yet, maybe next year. Maybe when the kids grow up and when the pitching holds together. Maybe when the bats wake up. They finally get to the edge in 1980. They get a 3-game lead with 3 games left and manage to turn the cleanest possible clinch scenario into a 1-game knife fight in Dodger Stadium. The Dodgers swept the final weekend. Every game was 1 run. So instead of a quiet champagne pop, Houston had to walk into LA on October 6th and play game 163 for its life. The winner is the National League West champion, and the loser will just be done. And because baseball has a cruel sense of theater, the man Houston handed the ball to was a knuckleballer. Not Nolan Ryan, not the ghost of the power arm when they lost J.R. Richard earlier in the season when he suffered a stroke. A knuckleballer, Joe Niekro, 35 years old, an old pro. The guy whose job on the biggest day in franchise history is throw the least obedient pitch in sports and somehow make it behave. And that's the hook tonight. Not just that Houston won. It's that Joe Niekro threw a complete game. It's that one of the strangest, twitchiest, least trustworthy pitches in baseball became the instrument of order on the most disorderly day the Astros had ever seen. And that's why this game matters. It's not just a standings decider, and it's not just a box score. It's a franchise learning in public what nerve feels like. Welcome back to the Astro 100. I'm documenting 1 game per player until I reach 100. Tonight, Astro 25, the player, Joe Niekro. The game is October 6, 1980. Houston Astros at Los Angeles Dodgers, a 1-game tiebreaker for the NL West. Houston wins 7-1 in Dodger Stadium, behind a complete game from Niekro and a 4 RBI afternoon from Art Howe. Attendance was 51,127. Game time 3:10. Sunny afternoon. The franchise pressure is at maximum volume. And before we get into the inning-by-inning story, I want to frame what kind of baseball environment this game belongs to. Because if you just say Astros beat Dodgers 7-1, you're missing the point. This isn't a routine regular season game. This is baseball balanced on a pin. It counted as a regular season game in the record book. But emotionally, it was already October in the loudest, meanest sense. Win and move on, lose, and your season collapses right there in the parking lot. Okay, we'll start with Houston's clubhouse. The Astros spent much of 1980 in first place, and they come into the final weekend of the season, with a 3-game lead over the Dodgers. And the division is theirs. Instead, the Dodgers won all 3, and not by blowouts. They're all 1-run games. That's the detail that matters here. Houston didn't get buried. They got squeezed. Every missed chance felt larger, and every error rang louder. All of a sudden, what should have been a clean clinch became a nervous reboot. The Astros, they're not some fluke leading team. They were serious. They finished 93-70 after the tiebreaker, setting a new record for franchise wins to get to that point. And they got there while carrying the emotional and competitive loss of J.R. Richard, who had been 10-4 with a sub-2 earned run average before his career-altering stroke on July 30th. And that matters here because it changes the emotional architecture of the entire season. Houston wasn't just trying to win its first division. It was trying to keep a season alive after one of the darkest shocks any contender can absorb. Now, the Dodgers clubhouse, they enter the final weekend with no room left. Sweep or go home. And they did it. Tommy Lasorda's club found the right kind of panic, the productive kind. Los Angeles forced this tiebreaker by winning 3 straight at home, all by 1 run, turning Dodger Stadium into a pressure cooker, and Houston into the team that suddenly had to explain itself. So by first pitch on October 6th, the Dodgers had the momentum, the crowd, the home field from a coin flip, and the emotional rhythm of a team that's already survived elimination 3 days in a row. So that's your clubhouse contrast. Houston is trying not to let a collapse become its identity. LA is trying to finish the miracle it just started. And the timing makes this even better. In the NL East, the Phillies had just clinched the division on October 4th when Mike Schmidt hit an 11th inning homer against Montreal. So Philadelphia is already waiting, breathing, and watching the West sort itself out. In the American League, the Royals and Yankees are about to start the ALCS, with Kansas City finally trying to get past the New York team that had blocked it repeatedly in October, and with George Brett coming off a 390 MVP season. So the whole sport's already pivoting into postseason mode. And that matters for our tone here. This game isn't baseball in isolation. This is baseball entering one of its classic October corridors. Schmidt already did something dramatic. Brett turned the AL into his personal stage. And the Yankees are still the Yankees. The Phillies are loaded. And out west, the Astros and Dodgers are playing a game that technically lives in the regular season, but spiritually, it belongs in the same theater as the playoffs. And for me, the deepest subplot in this episode is not LA, it's absence. It's J.R. Richard. Because when you think of the 1980 Astros, you can't honestly think of them as just a standing story. Richard was having the kind of year that bends a franchise's shape. He was 10-4 with a 1.90 earned run average in 17 starts. He started the All-Star game, and he was part of a Houston rotation that looked terrifying, with Richard, Ryan, and Niekro. Then he suffered the stroke that eventually ended his major league career. So when Joe Niekro takes the ball here, he isn't just replacing the usual starter in a normal sequence. He is, in a larger sense, carrying some of the emotional weight that Richard can't carry anymore. The Astros are trying to finish a season that has taken a major emotional casualty, and that doesn't make Niekro's job any easier. It makes it heavier. And because he's a knuckleballer rather than a flamethrower, the game feels even more weird. Houston's season is on the fingertips of a man trying to throw butterflies through a hurricane. And that's a great baseball story. All right, let's get into the dugouts here. Bill Verdon, one of those baseball men whose resume makes more sense the longer you stare at it. As a player, he was the 1955 NL Rookie of the Year. He won a Gold Glove in 1962, and he was a part of Pittsburgh's 1960 World Series club. As a manager, he became the winningest skipper in Astros history and guided Houston to its first postseason appearance in 1980. Not usually framed as a grand mythic baseball celebrity, but he is the kind of hard-edged baseball lifer that you want managing a team built on pitching, defense, and nervous late-season games. Tommy Lasorda is already deep into becoming the Tommy Lasorda. In 1980, he hadn't fully piled up the Hall of Fame hardware, but hindsight lets us see exactly what kind of figure is in the opposite dugout. A future Hall of Fame manager, eventual winner of 1,599 wins, 2 World Series titles, and one of the loudest public personalities baseball ever produced. He was part evangelist, part carnival barker, part motivator, and part chaos machine. And when you put that man in the one-game playoff at home, the emotional temperature goes up by itself. Now for the starters. Niekro was born in Martins Ferry, Ohio, went to West Liberty, debuted in 1967, and built a 22-game major league career that ended with 221 wins. He wasn't always this version of himself. Early on, he was more of a conventional pitcher, but the knuckleball, taught in the family and sharpened through his relationship with his brother Phil, became the reason he endured and then flourished. In Houston, he became the best version of Joe Niekro, a 1979 All-Star, the NL wins leader that year, and the first Astro pitcher to win 20 games in consecutive seasons, doing it in 1979 and then again in 1980. Joe Niekro is not some novelty act. Yes, he throws a novelty pitch, but he's an ace. This tiebreaker win gives him 20 wins for the season and cemented one of the central truths of his Houston years. When the franchise needed steadiness, Niekro was often the adult in the room. And the Dodgers counter with Dave Goltz, a right-hander from Pelican Rapids, Minnesota, drafted by the Twins in 1967. Goltz had real credibility. In 1977, he won 20 games for Minnesota and logged 303 innings. And that sounds fake by modern standards. But in 1980, after signing with LA, he was coming off a disappointing regular season and entered this tiebreaker at 7-10. That's a key contrast here because Houston is starting a pitcher who feels like certainty, while Los Angeles is starting a pitcher who feels like maybe a bad decision. The obvious Hall of Famer in the starting lineups is Joe Morgan, and that alone gives the game an extra charge. Morgan's one of the defining infielders of the 1970s, an engine of the Big Red Machine, and now here he is in his second Houston act, bringing old man genius and late career certainty to a club that desperately needs both. Beyond the official Hall of Fame count, the field is full of baseball gravity. Dusty Baker is in left field for the Dodgers. Steve Garvey's at first. And Tommy Lasorda's in the dugout. Fernando Valenzuela appears in relief, just 19 years old, months before Fernando Mania detonates across baseball in 1981. Steve Howe, who also appears in relief, won the National League Rookie of the Year award for 1980. So even though Cooperstown count in the lineup isn't huge, the game is crowded with baseball consequence. Before the final weekend, Joe Morgan said, "There's no way they can win 4 games in a row from us." The beauty is, for 3 days, that quote looked like a disaster. Then on the 4th day, the only 4th day that mattered, it became a prophecy. This is fantastic baseball dialogue. It captures the weirdness of swagger. Morton wasn't wrong in spirit. He was just briefly very uncomfortable on the path to being right. And that gives you a nice tonal lever. Houston isn't cocky, but Joe Morgan gives them the language of belief. Meanwhile, the Dodgers have the emotional upper hand of the weekend sweep. So the pregame vibe is perfect. One side has the quote and one side has the momentum. One side thinks the odds must finally turn back its way, while the other thinks destiny has started. The Astros and Dodgers had been NL West rivals since Houston moved into the division in 1969. And by 1980, the race had tightened into something nasty and claustrophobic. Houston finished 9-10 against the Dodgers in the full regular season ledger. That includes this tiebreaker. That's a perfect summary of the tension. These were teams that were close enough to bruise each other all year long, and the margin between finishing first and finishing second was just 1 day. And that's why this doesn't feel like a random baseball game. It feels like the logical ending to a season-long argument. The Dodgers forced Houston to prove it the hard way. Houston answered by proving it the Dodgers' own house. That's rivalry baseball at its cleanest. Now, a side quest. Fernando Valenzuela is already in the frame, not as the star yet, and not as the 1981 icon. He later wins the Rookie of the Year and the Cy Young Award, but he appears here as a teenage reliever. Later, Tommy Lasorda would say he regretted using Valenzuela out of the bullpen that day before ever giving him a chance to start the tiebreaker. Gives this game a strange before-the-storm quality. You're watching a Dodgers season, and while the next great Dodger story is literally standing nearby in embryo form. That's the kind of thing casual fans might remember once they're told. Not who won, but who's already on stage before the spotlight hit him. Joe Niekro is one of those players who can get flattened by family context if you're not careful. He's Phil's younger brother, yes. He's also a substantial baseball figure on his own. He won 221 games in the majors, made an all-star team, and led the league in wins in 1979. He became a 2-time 20-game winner and remained one of the most successful knuckleball pitchers of his era. The brothers combined for 539 wins, the most by any pair of brothers in Major League history. And he matters especially in Houston, because that's where he fully became legible. The Astros purchased his contract in 1975. The version of Joe Niekro that emerges there, not just durable, but defining. He turns into the kind of pitcher a franchise can trust with its emotional center. That's what this game is really telling you. The standings matter, but the larger point on this is that on the biggest day Houston ever had experienced, the ball went to Joe Niekro because he had become the man they believed could hold the room together. And there's something beautiful about the knuckleball in that role. It's a pitch associated with old men and craft and unpredictability, but here it functions like steel. That's what part of makes Niekro a great focused player choice. He turns the supposedly unserious pitch into a pressure valve for the whole city. Now, for Niekro especially, this game is legacy compression. A lot of careers have one day that condenses everything. This is that day for him in Houston. He gets his 20th win, he throws a 6-hit complete game, and sends the Astros to their first pro season. He does it in a 1-game playoff against the franchise's great division rival on the road after Houston just got punched in the face for 3 days in a row. If you're Joe Niekro, that means a few things. One, you're no longer just part of the 1980s Astros. You're one of the symbols of why 1980 worked at all. Two, you become part of a franchise memory in a way stats alone can't produce. And three, you get one of the cleanest answer cards any player can hold. Biggest game in franchise history up to that point. Who pitched it? Joe Negro. Now let's walk it. The Astros wasted no time. Terry Poole leads off the game and reaches on an error by David Lopes. That's an alarm bell instantly going off inside Dodger Stadium. Enos Cabell follows with a single, and then while Joe Morgan is at the plate, Cabell steals second. Morgan strikes out, but Jose Cruz reaches on a fielder's choice that turns into a Joe Ferguson error. Poole scores. Then Cesar Cedeno grounds out, and Cabell scores. Just like that, before the Dodgers have even settled in, Houston's up 2-0. That first inning tells you the game immediately. Houston isn't waiting for some slow, elegant buildup. It's taking Dodgers' mistakes and treating them as an invitation. Joe Negro follows that by retiring LA in order in the bottom half of the first, then again making the second inning disappear. So now the Astros have both the lead and the game rhythm. The third inning is where the inning becomes real. Jose Cruz singles, Cedeno singles and steals second, and then Art Howe unloads a 2-run homer to deep left center. Suddenly it's 4-0 Houston. Dodger Stadium has gone from a desperate party atmosphere to a full body concern. Howe, who went 3 for 5 with 4 RBI in the game, is now the secondary star of the story. Negro is the spine. Howe is the hammer. And to the Dodgers' credit, they get a chance in the bottom of the third. Mickey Hatcher singles, Daryl Thomas singles, 2 on, nobody out. And that feels like an inning where the home crowd can bring itself back into the game. But Negro then got Rudy Law to fly out, Davey Lopes to fly out, and Jay Johnstone to pop out. 0 runs. And that's one of the hidden swing points of the afternoon. Houston already landed a punch. Negro made sure Los Angeles never punched back. Then comes the fourth, and that's the inning that effectively kills the suspense. Rick Sutcliffe is in for Goltz. Poole bunts for a single, steals second and third base. Cabell walks and Morgan walks, bases loaded. Jose Cruz hits a sacrifice fly, and Poole scores. Cedeno walks to reload the bases. Then Art Howe singles and drives in 2 more. In the span of 4 innings, Houston gone from nervous traveler to 7-0 executioner. The Dodgers do get 1 back in the bottom of the 4th. Dusty Baker singles, advances on an error, and Rick Monday singled him home. That makes it 7-1. For a second, if you're the Dodgers, you're thinking maybe a rally, maybe 1 inning changes the day. But Negro never lets the game get messy enough for that. In the 6th, LA mounts its last serious threat. Monday walks, Ferguson singles, a pass ball moves him up. The runner's in scoring position with 2 outs, and the house is trying to wake up. Daryl Thomas flies out, done. That was the last real pulse. After that, Negro settled again, and the final innings become less like a comeback attempt and more like a stadium accepting its disappointment. And that's the beauty of this performance. It's not just that he threw a complete game. It's how he managed the game's emotional weather. He got the Dodgers almost nothing to clean. He gave the Dodgers nothing clean to build on. He allowed 6 hits, 1 run, but he never let the pressure avalanche back onto Houston. In a game where tension could have metastasized at any moment, Joe Negro kept making the next inning smaller than the last. Now for Houston, the meaning is simple and enormous. This is the first postseason berth in franchise history, their first division title, the first time through the door. And that wasn't a small thing. That's civic memory. That's one of those dates that if you're building an Astros 100, automatically carries extra weight because the franchise identity is changing in real time. Houston isn't just competitive anymore. Houston's a postseason team now. For the Dodgers, it's one of those uniquely painful baseball endings because they already completed the hard part. They erased the deficit. They swept the weekend. They put Houston on the ropes, and they had home field advantage. And then they fell behind immediately and never recovered. It's a season that ends for them not with slow failure, but with sudden flatness. And that's why 1-game playoffs are so nasty. All the work of the comeback buys you 1 bad afternoon, and then oblivion. Now, this game is an easy sell to a casual fan if you want to explain baseball to someone who thinks it's too slow, too granular, and too full of dead air. This game is a great counter argument. You have elimination pressure, a division race compressed into one afternoon, a franchise that never ever reached October before, a rival at home, and early errors that immediately matter. It also had a veteran Hall of Fame second baseman talking big before the weekend, and a teenage Valenzuela cameo before history finally recognizes him. And at the center of it, a knuckleballer throwing the weirdest pitch in baseball in the least forgiving setting possible. Now that's not sleepy baseball, that's great sports drama. And if you want to create a brand new baseball fan, this is the lesson. Baseball can feel big without becoming loud in the obvious way. It can feel gigantic through one stolen base, one booted grounder, one sacrifice fly, just one moment where the crowd realizes the game's getting away from it. And that's why this afternoon has stakes plus texture. After the game, Nick Rose moved with joy without mystery. He said this kind of game doesn't require extra effort to get up for, and he said he'd never been happier. That sounds exactly right for the tone of the day. Relief, gratitude, disbelief, and the feeling that one of the largest emotional burdens of his career had just lifted all at once. Art Howe's post-game tone was almost wonderfully restrained. He described it as the thrill of a lifetime, but also noted it was hard to go crazy because the Astros had to play again the next day. That's a great baseball line. It captures the strangest of postseason transition. You reach the summit, and the sport immediately says, terrific, now report to the next mountain. Bill Burton's documented line is almost managerial to the point of comedy. He said the teams had equal ability and that in a one-run game, anything can happen. That's exactly what a manager would say after his team wins a tiebreaker by 6 runs. He declines the romance and returns everything to math. Honestly, that's part of why he's the right manager for this club. Nico's relieved and grateful. Howe is thrilled, but looking at tomorrow. Verdon, dry and controlled, refusing to let the celebration become mythology while he's standing in it. And that trio feels right. Houston didn't have any luxury after winning this. The Phillies were already waiting, and the Astros had to move immediately to the NLCS. They lost Game 1 to Philadelphia, split the first 2 on the road, then returned home for one of the most grueling postseason series baseball has ever seen. Philadelphia wins 3-2, and the final 4 games all went to extra innings. The Astros held late leads in games 4 and 5 and still lost the pennant. It remains one of the most painful and famous near misses in their history. Joe Niekro, for his part, stayed excellent, even after this game. In NLCS Game 3, he throws 10 scoreless innings before Houston finally wins in the 11th. The irony here is brutal. The man who dragged Houston in October kept doing his job in October. Still wasn't enough to get the Astros to the World Series. Now, the Dodgers season ended here, but not the larger story. They came back in 1981, and Fernando Valenzuela became Fernando Valenzuela. Los Angeles won the World Series the following year's strike split season, which gives this 1980 tiebreaker an extra historical spring. Houston won the next day. Houston got the longer revenge arc. Now, after 1980, Joe Niekro remained a significant pitcher. He opened 1981 as Houston's opening day starter, helped the Astros back into the postseason in that strike year, later pitched for the Yankees and Twins. Eventually, he wins a World Series ring with Minnesota in 1987, which was his only World Series appearance. He finishes with 221 wins, 1 All-Star selection, a 3.59 earned run average, and a place among the most accomplished knuckleballers the game had ever seen. His later public memory has a few strange footnotes. The nail file incident in 1987, for example. The cleaner memory is Houston. Joe Niekro as stabilizer, craftsman, and the man who helped carry the Astros into their first postseason ever. He died at age 61 at 2006 after suffering a brain aneurysm. And that's worth saying plainly. Joe Niekro's not just a funny pitch guy from old highlights. He's one of the real pitchers in Astros history, one of the real builders. Next time we leave baseball entirely. Next time we leave baseball entirely and open up with Warrior 01, Andy Phillip, on December 12, 1950. The Philadelphia Warriors beat the New York Knicks 101-91. And Phillip is one of those perfect early season bridges for basketball. A Hall of Famer, one of the game's great first playmakers, a guard from the sport's early architecture before the modern NBA fully became itself. So the next episode isn't just a new sport. It's a jump into basketball prehistory, back when you could still see the wiring. So that was Astro 25, Joe Niekro, October 6, 1980, a franchise with 19 years of waiting, a division lead blown in real time, and a one-game playoff in enemy territory. The veteran knuckleballer handed the ball on the biggest day the Astros had ever seen, and then somehow the strangest pitch in baseball became the steadiest thing on the field. And that's why this game belongs here. Not because Astro 100 is just about talent. It's about pressure. It's about memory. It's about all those days that tell you who somebody was when the season had no more room for error. And on this day, Joe Niekro was exactly what Houston needed him to be. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.